Good evening. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We have a few folks in person, and I'm sure we have a few folks on Zoom. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, August 23rd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. So my comments will be brief. I hope everyone is taking some time off and enjoying, especially our students, some downtime over the summer. The board and the administration really continue to work throughout the summer, the administration especially, as quickly as school winds down, the work begins to get school opened. We're also transitioning to a new school at Ox Ridge. I was over there this afternoon and the school looks absolutely fantastic. They were actually putting blacktop down in the parking lot this afternoon. So that's going to be an exciting move. The building committee is organizing around kind of a ribbon cutting and an introduction of that school to the community and the new students. So stay tuned for some good information on that. I know on a weekly basis, the Hindley Homes and Royal building committee is working. They've moved through design concepts. So a lot going on. We are also moving into contract negotiations over the course of the summer with our teachers. So that process has started. So the board and the administration continue to work diligently, but I hope our students and parents are all getting some downtime this summer. So with that, Michelle, I'll move over to public comment.
Good evening. For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge and call each participant to the microphone. For participants via Zoom, please click the raise hand option. For all participants, please state your name and address for the record log. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Should we start with in person?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So anyone in person, come up to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joanna Walsh. I live at 17 Pleasant Street, and I am the chair of CDSP. We are concerned about some of the elementary school class sizes for this upcoming school year. We believe the district is ignoring its own policy, particularly in the Holmes kindergarten and 4th grades and the Royal 5th grade. District Policy 6510, the Administrative Class Size Guidelines, establishes the appropriate class size ranges for the pupils, the teacher, the subject matter, and the teaching methods of a particular grade or class. The optimal range for kindergarten classes is 19 to 21 students. The largest number of students a kindergarten should have for 3 sections is 63. Holmes Kindergarten already has 64. The optimal range for 4th and 5th grade classes is 21 to 23 students. The largest number of students a 5th grade should have for 2 sections is 46. Royal 5th grade already has 47. The largest number of students a 4th grade should have for 3 sections is 69 students. Holmes 4th grade already has 70. These subtracted sections were already approved as part of the 22-23 budget. Budget control would remain untouched if you reinstated these classes. In fact, the district would still be down an elementary section overall. We are having a hard time understanding the educational value of creating several class sizes above the optimal range. The class size policy specifically says, where possible, smaller classes should be run for our youngest students. After ELP, kindergarten students are our youngest students. Rising 4th and 5th graders have spent a very large amount of time in elementary school during a pandemic. They spent an entire school year socially distanced from one another. Many are still relearning the norms of the classroom and appropriate school behavior. This is not the time to put them in unnecessarily large classrooms. We ask that the BOE adhere to your own class size guidance and maintain the as budgeted 3 sections for Royal 5th grade, 4 sections for Holmes 4th grade, and 4 sections for Holmes kindergarten. Thank you.
Joanne, I would just ask that I appreciate you making the public comment. I'm concerned by you using the word we're ignoring. We haven't even had the discussion yet about the class sizes. They're being presented tonight and we're going to talk through them. So using certain words does matter. We're not ignoring anything. All right. Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Brian Edgar, and I live at 30 Hilton Street. This coming school year, I'll have a 7th grader at Middlesex Middle School and a 5th grader at Holmes. First, thank you all for serving on the board. Your hard work does not go unnoticed. I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you give so many of us to speak during public comment. I'm here tonight to propose changing the starting time at Darien High School to 8:30 a.m. I'm under no illusions that this change will be easy. Resistance to change is natural and expected. Opposition to this proposal may be as strong as the proponents. However, I believe that this change is worthy of our students. Let me begin to make the case for this change this way. Connecticut is in a group of only 4 states in the nation that begin classes on average earlier than 7:45 a.m. The other states are Louisiana, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. The first bell at DHS is at 7:40 a.m. The earliest bus pickup for DHS is 6:53 a.m. As you may know, the start time for Greenwich High School is 8:30 a.m. and New Canaan is considering this change for the 2022-23 school year. I suspect that other districts in our district will follow suit. There is no shortage of data or studies showing the importance of sleep for teens. The data show that adequate sleep not only impacts academic performance, but it is also a critical component in the mental and physical health of our teens. Ensuring adequate sleep could be another tool in our effort to support our students' mental health. I believe as you do that schools exist for children. You as a board with the support of our community have already made important and impactful changes that have benefited our students. We hired an additional psychologist at each elementary school. We hired an additional assistant principal at each elementary school. We've begun the process of renovating our elementary schools and eliminating the portables. And soon we will dedicate a new elementary school at Oxbridge. All these things were done to better serve all of our elementary school students. Changing the starting time at DHS to 8:30 would continue those efforts. This one change will benefit all DHS students. When we view it through that lens, the choice to change the start time for high school becomes easy. As Mr. Deneen said in another board meeting, Darien is viewed as a leader in education in our state. I believe that this is a perfect opportunity to lead our community in the proper direction. I encourage the board to make this a priority, add this to a future agenda, and begin the work to change the start time at DHS to 8:30 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the audience this evening? Please come up.
Good evening, Diane Urban, 10 Crane Road. I'm CDSP Community Outreach and DEI Chair. I'm speaking tonight with concern related to the Board of Education's 2022-2023 strategic goals and the strategic plan. Goal number 2 from the strategic plan is fostering a culture that promotes wellness, diversity, and inclusion. During the July 13th BOE meeting, it was noted that the board would discuss possible revisions to the strategic plan to address district needs, with the suggestion to pivot from DEI to general wellness. Diversity, equity, inclusion is still very much a district need, as is attention to mental health, and the two are not mutually exclusive. There seems to be a misperception among some that DEI initiatives and our district's continued DEI work would solely encompass minority and marginalized groups, when in fact inclusion means all. DEI supports the social and emotional needs of all students. It is inclusive of mental health for all students. Equitable practices consider the academic demands and supports of students struggling with mental health. Anxiety and depression are disabilities. As DEI is inclusive of mental health, there is no need to abandon the commitment and initial steps taken in our district's strategic plan and DEI work in order to put focus on mental health and wellness in the 2022-2023 goals. Moreover, mental health concerns and needs will be different across our student population, which is why it is imperative to continue to look holistically at mental health with a DEI lens. For example, in the ACT's published report supporting the mental health well-being of high school students, they found that students identifying as African American, Hispanic, or Asian Pacific Islander are less likely than white students to say they could reach out to a teacher or counselor if they need mental health support. Our own students have shared that these trusted connections are lacking. Working to improve all our students' access to mental health support includes attention to each student's unique needs. Again, believe no pivot is needed, perhaps a more broadened board and community perspective that DEI incorporates all, and that continued work in this space is congruent to the work necessary to address the critical mental health needs of our entire school community. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening. Michelle, do we have anyone on? Oh, please come up.
Good summer.
Thank you. Just with the windows open, yeah, just keep the mic closed. Thank you
Bit
so
of a
much.
shorty. so I'll
Thank you.
Pop right. Oh, that's new. Is that new? Where you see yourself? I'm like, all right. My name is Armel Jacobs. I'm 12 Fitch. I want to incorporate, I think, every comment that came before me, in particular Diane's, about keeping DEI in the strategic plan. I guess I wasn't entirely surprised, but I was taken aback that, Mr. Brown, you suggested that the plan is not something we're stuck with, and that we might want to pivot away from DEI and more toward wellness. I don't think the point of a living document, as I understand it, is that it is able to stretch and grow and move, and you can choose what to focus on and what needs to address at the time that they need addressing. Unless you have some type of problem with DEI, which I think, given the voting record, is not a totally unfair question to ask. Unless you have some type of problem with it, I'm not sure why it needs to be removed so much as to continue being exactly what it's being, which is a living document that allows you to move and focus and be nimble, focus where you need to. But I would also reassert the point that Diane is making, that diversity, equity, inclusion is inclusive of wellness. And from the students that I spoke to this year, your students of color are not having an easy time. And I know that many of them came here to say that, not just your students of color, many of your marginalized students. And many of them came here to share that with you. So I really can't understand, unless you have some type of vendetta or problem with DEI, why it would necessarily need to be removed from the strategic plan. So I would urge you to please keep it in there, because there are students who are relying on you guys to focus on that as a goal. I also want to say, if I have another minute, I was really concerned by some of the discussion at the last meeting about limiting public comment. I think there are places, right, where it's a wild, wild west. I don't think that's here. I think, to the extent that people disagree with you, I haven't heard much by way of personal attack. The hardest thing anybody had to go through here was last fall, when there were suggestions that certain people should resign. And honestly, if you cannot handle that type of criticism, I'm not sure this kind of volunteer opportunity is for you, because it's part of the elective process. I think it was Patricia say last meeting that you're here elected to be representatives of the community at large. So part of the job, we're not distracting you from your job when we come here and give our public comment. The job is to
You're almost
listen.
at time, Arno.
I'll continue when that's up for debate next time. Anyway, I want to thank you guys. You guys
No,
do a
thank
great
you.
job, but
Thank you.
hear us.
Also, I just, again, there's no removing of DEI from the strategic plan. We just continue to have a conversation as to how DEI works, and that strategic plan we've all committed to and is a living and breathing document. So again, there is no removal of DEI. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Sorry.
No, we're done. You can come back at the public comment at the end.
Alert the public to 1 hour and 12 minutes in or so, if you want to see where that's.
It's
This is why-
yeah, it's part of the conversation, but DEI is not being removed. All right, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. Anyone online? Michelle?
There are no raised hands at this time.
All right. We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. Those people online, and thank you for your presence this evening. It's hard to imagine that summer school, like 5 weeks, has nearly passed, and Friday will conclude summer school in ESY. I want to thank the staff for a very productive and successful summer school and ESY. The enrollment was basically maybe a wee bit lower than last year, but pretty much on par for the most part. ESY parents will receive progress reports at the end of this week here. They'll be sent out. And then there are 2 bridge programs, primarily for our DLC students, that take place over the next 2 weeks between Tokenique and high school. Just a wee announcement that the Music Man is on at the high school. It's just amazing what they can do in the number of weeks that I had the opportunity to go by and watch some of that the other day. It's at Thursday, Friday, 7 p.m. Saturday's a matinee at 2. And I think the tickets are all just purchased at the door. That it looks tremendous. Also, the Lion King kids version for the junior musical workshop over at Tokenique. That's Wednesday and Thursday, 11:15 to 10:45 or so. And admission is free to that. So if you get a big chance and you want to see some of the kids, stop by. As the chairman mentioned, it has been a busy summer. It's been going by quickly. We update on the mental health issues and progress towards that. The hub directors that participated in the board's retreat or special meeting, they have conducted the 2-day post-vention prevention training. Mrs. Klein and Dr. McCarthy were our 2 representatives to that. A smaller group of the town's mental health task force met actually today. And then the second meeting of the mental health task force of the town will be on Thursday, and that's a greater audience. And there's Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman are part of that particular group, as am I. So we'll go to that meeting on Thursday, and we'll see the progress that we're making. And the smaller group is out sort of formulating the plan, so to speak, I think, to bring back the mental health group. We did meet with the high school and Dr. Welt, the CEO from Child Guidance, who came here one night and presented. We will be meeting again next Wednesday as we look at all of those issues that I mentioned the last time, from how do we open school, how do we close school, commitment meetings and so on and so forth. So that continues. I think we'll be bringing at some point here before the start of the school year a recommendation to the board for some intervention. And so just stay tuned to that. The same actually can be said for school security. We'll continue to meet very regularly and closely with the police department, in particular the police chief. So we look forward to bringing that as soon as it's in a form to present to you. I also want to make sure the board asks for significant lead time on that. So I think a full sort of week of lead time to read the proposal to you. It's kind of what we're trying to plan for. So once that date is set, once we know we're ready to go, we will announce that and work with the board to meet. You okay? Sorry, I thought you were. Sorry. The hiring process, well, we've between 12, 14 positions still to hire for. And I think all but one of those is in an acute area, a shortage area. So those are really difficult, as we've talked about before. Those are difficult positions to hire for, but those are the ones that are currently being advertised and interviewed. We mentioned the Ox Ridge. There was mention about the Ox Ridge ribbon cutting ceremony the week of the 14th, August 14th, potentially. There was a date of potentially August 19th. I think we have to find out like who's available, what people we want there. It's not I don't believe a relatively quick decision. I want to make sure that that has been done properly in terms of contextually, either with kids, not with kids, so on and so forth. So we'll communicate about that. We'll solicit your feedback as to availability and who should actually be at the ceremony. And we have not heard yet from the State Department of Public Health or the State Department of Education. They are meeting in August, and we will hear accordingly whatever comes out of their summit.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special meeting and regular meeting held on June 28, 2022, minutes of the special meeting held on July 13, 2022. Mrs. McCammon, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? Thank you. We'll move forward. Further discussion and possible action on proposed board goals for 2022-2023. Dr. Adley. Oh, sorry about that. Committee reports. Jill.
The HHR Building Committee
as you know, and Duke alluded to earlier, has been meeting. We have approved conceptual designs. We'll come back to you. I'm going to work with Alan and Duke to come back to you and just show you what they are. At this point, that's the broad outlines. There's still a lot to be figured out. So the next stage we're going through is the actual schematic design and what exactly is inside those lines. We're also continuing to work on the site plans, and we are in close consultation on the security discussions as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of good work going on there. We'll move on to presentations and discussions. Further discussion and possible action on proposed board goals for 2022, 2023. Dr. Adler.
So before you are the draft goals with strategic work and measures articulated accordingly. Again, this is for your consideration and deliberation, should you want to make revisions or otherwise. So you can, for the public's benefit, the goal number 1 is evaluate and maximize safety and security practices for students and staff. The second goal talks about the mental health wellness needs of students and staff. The third goal oversees year 2 implementation of strategic plan. And then the fourth goal is to enhance the board and district communication. So these are items that we spoke about at our special meeting in the summer. I'll just highlight 1 or 2 things because it's pretty clear. It's pretty easy to read the document. Under number 1, we'll do the security audit and to make sure that that is all in place. Under goal 2 is to participate in the state pilot of the SEL screening. That's a wee bit of a different screening because other screenings that we have given in the past and other surveys are more anonymous in nature. This one is not. Would allow for a parent opt-out too, if that was the case. Goal 3, since it was mentioned this evening, there's an action, a strategy there to revise the strategic plan to meet the district needs. And I recognize that's not a euphemism for doing away with goal 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's just simply responding to the needs and making modifications as we go along. And then hence the board and district communications, that goes back really to last year's goals and perhaps addressing that communications committee and getting that up and running.
Thank you, Dr. Adler. Board comments, questions? Mrs. McCammon.
Just a quick one. Alan, I wanted to ask if you would consider putting for goal 1 under strategic work, what I just mentioned, that close consultation with HHR, because I think some of the work that you'll be doing here at the district will inform necessarily what we'd be doing.
I certainly will add whatever the board thinks that whatever they want to consider or you want to consider.
Could you say that again?
Just wanting to identify in writing that there's of course, Alan is working with the committee on everything we're designing, but around security.
HHR.
as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Physical.
Yeah.
Physical.
Physical security, but if there were to be personnel changes that impacted also the layout of the building, yes, it would be physical ultimately, but we have no decision-making on your model, just wanting to be sure that the committee is responsive to the model as opposed to deriving its own.
Right.
In the what?
Isn't that in the building committee's charge that it liaison? And I haven't read the charge in a long time, so you can tell me it's not, but it should be, if it got by, that it will liaise with the school district.
Absolutely. Just because we're highlighting security this year, I thought that it might be worth just when we go back through and look and say, what were our measures? How do we work on security? One of the ways in which we worked is that explicit liaison around the area of security and making sure that what the work that the district has done is also reflected in the renovation work where it impacts physical security.
Mrs. Warren. Thank
I
you.
just had a question about the SEL screening pilot. So it's saying it's completed?
No,
Or is that,
That's
okay.
how we.
we would participate.
And
We would be cohort 3.
so will we see it before the parents, or we'll just, as parents, see it at the same time as an opt-out? I'm just wondering if we get to review to see what it looks
Actually,
like. what's on
Ms. Warren, I'm not actually sure about that because we're participating right now. Some administrators are participating in the training for the summer and our staff will be participating in training too. So we will find out how that part works. I do know that there is an opt-out for parents. How that is rolled out and advised to be rolled out, I would take that under consultation, but I'll certainly keep you apprised.
Okay, yeah, because I'd wonder if parents could actually see it before they opt out, right? Because otherwise, my initial reaction would, if I wasn't going to see it, I would opt out.
Understood.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
If I could just expand on that, are you
Mike.
saying just the parents should see it, or should we as a board see it before we adopt it as a goal?
I was asking if we as the board were going to see it previously, but I guess we don't know if we're going to.
And I just don't know how that works timing wise, if that was a suggestion or don't know.
Did you say,
I guess, and maybe I gleaned something from that wasn't said, but I guess the question I had was, we're going to decide if we should adopt as a goal. Do we get to see what the survey is before we make that decision to include it as a goal, or no?
so I think I don't think you're adopting as a goal, you're adopting as some of the strategic work towards the goal.
Okay.
I would certainly keep people apprised. That's more administrative in nature to administer this particular survey.
Is it to K to 12?
I believe so, yes.
Mrs. Best?
Thank you. A couple of things. On the measures, those are what will be done, correct? They're written in past tense, which confused me for a second. It made it sound like they were completed. And I think that threw you off too, Ms. Warren.
Yeah, I guess you could
Like at the end of the day.
Mrs. Klein and I went back and forth on this, so you could say, for instance, the first one,
Okay.
complete the external.
I just
I'm
wanted to
doing
make
it
sure we were.
Sort of like
I
it's
was clear.
completed, it is done, so yes.
So the measure will be a completed one.
Right. Thank you.
Yes. I
Right?
On goal 3, I had flagged, I wonder if maybe we could revisit the language on strategic work. To just say revise strategic plan to meet needs presumes that it needs revising. So perhaps it's review and revise if necessary,
Where necessary, yeah,
I
where necessary,
think
probably is
that-
appropriate.
because I don't think that we have collectively agreed that there are revisions
Correct.
that need to be made. Either that or else I was wrestling with an idea of, check again against our vision and mission or truing up to the vision and mission it's something we should be doing regularly because this is a living document, but I don't want to get into a situation where we're assuming that it just should be changed.
Maybe it's through updates, continue to review and adjust as needed.
That's kind of
You
where I
know.
was
Yeah.
wanting to go. Thank you. That's well said.
Yeah.
And then on goal 4, 2 little things. One of the things I was missing in here was getting at this idea of efficiency. I think that's partly what the idea of enhancing the communications is about. And maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe that's something that we need to decide if and when there's a committee. But efficiency was missing for me. I also celebrate student and staff achievements was a bullet kind of in the middle and strategic work. And I kind of wanted to just celebrate students and staff. I think I'm looking for more opportunities for kids to be celebrated across the board, even if they weren't at the top of
I
the
like that.
podium. So,
It's a nice observation. Appropriate.
and that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Anything else from the board? Yes, Mrs. Ackman.
So I agree with Mrs. Best. I think that revised strategic plan makes it sound like there's a decision that is yet to be made. And it is a living document. And I think exactly what we saw here earlier tonight is what needs to not happen. We need to make sure that we believe in our strategic plan. We're acting upon our strategic plan and we act in real time in real world situations, and we will continue to do that. I'm a little confused in that some of these are really big, broad goals. And then enhanced board and district communications, you could argue is big or small. I see Mrs. McCammon's point that she's drawing a very distinct action item. That's why I asked for clarification. Thank you. About security. But then why wouldn't we do the same in other goals? But I'm throwing it out there, like later start times, right? So why wouldn't we be putting some major initiatives in here that we may or may not want to look at? Have we just not discussed major initiatives that we want to look at this year, which is an answer, but then we should be aware that this too still needs work. But I see a lot of big broad. I don't see a lot that's really substantively measurable. Like, have we improved wellness? That's a big nut to cut off in a year and try to say, did we? did we do that? So do we have any really actionable items that we want to do?
I think there's, oh,
I'm saying like, I'm later start times, more buses, less buses, working, security, I get, that's very measurable. The others, I don't see much that's really, it's pretty. I don't know if it's measurable.
so I would argue that our position that a lot of it is measurable in terms of it may be in completion of the work. Certainly if the board would like to discuss other topics, other projects, I'm happy to add them in, or at the board's collective agreement to add them in. So if there's things that are missing here that you would like to see, these are board goals, and I'm happy to accommodate those where there's agreement to add them.
But I think too, I think if you go back to the retreat, I think what we have to think about is in terms of additional initiatives is, I don't know, the conversation I heard, we came to kind of a conclusion, we have enough going on right now. We have a lot going on right now. And I think I'm not going to use the word I used because things continue to move on a daily basis. But, we can continue as a board to discuss it, or Dr. Adderley can bring things forward. I think part of what I heard coming out of that is let's make sure we're continuing to work through and implement DEI, that we're continuing to work through, and what does the new school year look like around mental health. We've got to do some updates, and we're going to hear more about security. We're going to bring a new school online. We're going to start renovating 3 other schools. So I think, what I heard was, it's tough to prioritize any of them, and they all kind of DEI, mental health, all kind of linked together. So I think, that's kind of where my head's around. I understand what you're saying in terms of can we define more some of the measurements we're looking to get out of this? Like I think of kind of the mental wellness side of it, and what does the new school year look like? How are we going to, speak to the students about what it's like to be a good student, a good athlete? Like, is there any work that needs to be done around that in terms of the handbook or the commitment or stuff like that?
So just my 2 specific points then, because
Yeah.
I was a little general. Michelle, if you don't mind going up to goal 2. With my caveat that I agree with Mrs. Best, I'd like to see that revised in goal 3. And then in goal 2, I'd like to understand more what that is. And what kind of our measures. Board of Education updates on mental health. I'd like to see it fleshed out more about mental health. And then my only thing is I do feel like education is missing from this set of goals. And maybe that's all in the strategic plan. We're just going to say education's all in the strategic plan, but I don't see a ton of education from the board goals this year. Things to think about.
I think with respect to goal 2, Dr. Alley, maybe this is something as a board we need to discuss what we're looking for. I think we had the folks come to our retreat. Maybe it's defining more where we are in the process right now, where we're going to move into in terms of post mental health and post suicide prevention and some of the stuff that we have to do. So maybe it's more of a timeline maybe as to how this looks over the course of the next year, because then you can see that we're achieving some of those goals within that timeline.
So for the mental health one, for example, some of the strategies and some of the measurements get a wee bit fuzzy, but administrative recommendations and interventions to support wellness and mental health, to complete that whole process. I can't say what those are right now. I have some ideas, and we're working towards those, but that's what I would bring forward to the board to make recommendations that these are maybe programs or other processes or practices that we'd like to implement, and look for support for that.
I would
Go ahead,
hope
Mrs.
that,
Moore.
I would hope that also with that, I'm still waiting on those updates that I keep asking for about how everyone's being used, the time that's being used, percentages that's being, counseled versus IEPs, 504s, counseling versus, are we meeting with regular ed versus special ed and all of that? Still waiting for that update to see where there's holes. Also, back to the SEL, can we get the name of that survey? Because I think we can find it on the Department of Education.
Yeah, there is an
website.
acronym, there's an acronym for it.
Yeah.
I'll get it for you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Sini.
I was just going to comment, as I understand it, goal 2, we're in the process of formulating some of the strategic work, going from crisis mode and hopefully to intervention mode, right? So
Better way. of
I'm not
saying it.
sure if we have all the detail just quite yet, because as I understand it, not only the district, but the community is still formulating that plan. So I would hope, I kind of think that that formulation fits into goal 2, and that will then be part of the measurement that we'll get there, but it still hasn't been formulated yet, as I understand.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I just would want to follow up Mr. Sini's comment. I thought we were actually not supposed to be doing definition and really fine point on what's supposed to happen at the next stage. I thought that was the advice. This is a process. And, we
Yeah, we're
continue on,
going,
continue.
we're going through the process.
But to have real specificity to Ms. Auckland's point, I'm not sure that's where we should be at this point from what I recall.
So I think there's
Go ahead.
I think there's two different things that we're talking about. I think one, there is a post-vention stage and then a prevention stage, given the suicides that we've had in town and the mental health needs. There is also mental health work that we know and we've been trying to do as a district. That's the piece I'm missing. I'm not looking for the experts, but I think we've looked at programs or different counseling services, or we've heard about start times for years, and maybe that would help with sleep in kids. Like, I'm looking for outside of that post-vention and prevention process for very specific mental health need. We have seen anxiety and depression rise as accommodated needs in our schools for a number of years now. Is there anything kind of as a district we're looking at doing? I'm not saying that we need all the answers. This just seems very, very broad to me. And seems that, let me put it this way, and I say it with due respect, you could give us updates all throughout the year on mental health and check, we have hit that measure. The question is, what have we done? Because we've gotten updates. And so I think that we could have some more action-oriented ideas around this. I'm used to that. That doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, but I would love to see some if we could come up with some. If we
Well,
can, and the board hasn't put them forward, and we're comfortable moving forward with this, my only caution to the board was that make sure when you measure, you didn't just check the box and measure. What does that mean? Like, did we really take action on something?
So I guess to your superintendent comments, you have, or will have on the agenda, the plan you're working on where you even referenced some of the intervention things you want to implement, potential person you may want to talk to us about. So is that stuff that's coming down the pipe that
That's part of it. And some of this is process. I am interested, if the board's interested in talking about, we had a topic tonight about start times. If you're interested in doing that, you could say to me, Superintendent, are you interested in doing it? Or you could say, look, we really want you to do it, right? Or we really want you to look at that or something else, right? So I'm open to those ideas. We did put, like for the record, I did put on what I thought was teaching and learning, particularly for math acceleration for our topic around that for all children. And we decided not to do that, right? So I tried to put on a very focused topic. But I'm open for board suggestions. It's your document in the sense of your goals.
Mrs. Parent?
So can we, I agree, so the second to last bullet to me seems on the strategic work goal 2.
Okay.
It seems very super broad, provide resources to support mental health needs. That could be providing worksheets for mental health. That could be providing extra buses. That could be changing start times. It just seems super, super broad. Could we change that to say, identify, prioritize, and provide resources to support? So there's some action words in there that we're identifying what needs to be in front of our children and what needs to be changed.
The model for the current year.
Pardon?
you're asking that we create a model for the current year.
Right. So from the outset, let's identify what needs to happen and prioritize how we're gonna go about and do that.
I think some of it
That's what I'm
plays,
doing.
I think,
Yeah.
I think
But
some of,
just Codify it.
but some of it may play into what Mrs. Worm is saying is, I think I know what I always, think about, is do we have the right amount? Do we continue to have the right amount of resources? We've invested in the psychologists and all that type of stuff, but based on scheduling, based on what we know has happened over the last year and what some of the needs have been, I think that's what I want to continue to make sure that we have the right resources based on the time that these folks are allocated to everything from IEPs to just check-ins to just checkups on individual students and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I deliberately use resources in a broad sense of personnel, time, talents. I'm absolutely more than happy to compile, collate suggestions from people, bring them back as suggestions that came from the board.
I think you have some thoughts from this discussion. And
I do.
okay, good. And if there's anything else, yeah, Mrs. Bass.
More thoughts,
Sure.
sorry, because we all know I asked to start a conversation on later start times at the high school. I don't know what the forum is for that. I mean, it would certainly be something that I would expect we'd be discussing as part of ways to ease the stress, support our students, improve their mental health. It's also something that we wouldn't be doing by August 27th or whatever the start date of school is, obviously. So,
Right.
but how do we start that conversation? Where does it need to appear in an agenda or a goal for us to start discussing that as a community so that by August 27th of 2023, if it makes sense and we think it's right, we could be ready. I don't know the answer.
Dude,
Yeah, Mr. Senior.
I think like we were told specifically by the experts in the crisis mode not to like focus on specific things until we get to that postvention or prevention mode. We got to be really careful of knee-jerk reactions because as they told us, everything you implement affects one student one way and one family one way and could have the reverse action the other way. So without getting specific, and that's why I want to stay away from specifics right now because we're still in this, as I understand it, the crisis mode.
Mhm.
And later on, yes, if as administration develops a plan on this mental health and the response to the suicide crisis, then we can start to pick our spots to project some of these ideas. But I really want to be careful about putting that in our goals because that might not be a goal for the next year. It might be something we want to discuss 2 or 3 years out because there's different priorities. I just don't know what the priorities are yet. And I want to stay away from the specificity right now.
Mrs. Warren.
But I think we still need all the data.
I didn't say data, I said on the goals, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Best, to your point, and not to ignore is probably the elephant in the room since it's come up repeatedly throughout the last week. Thank you for bringing it up from an audience standpoint. So, I know some other districts have gone down that path. Again, I think as a board, if it's something we want to kind of start a conversation on, I'm okay with that. Not that it's about me, it's about us as a board. I think what we have to think about and where I would rely on the administration to guide us is my initial thought on all of that as we started to hear more about it this week is where does it fit into the overall mental health, mental awareness, and where does it fit into that overall plan? I think previously districts have just gone down the path of, hey, this is a good thing from a sleep standpoint. California's, I think, mandated it last I read, but I think it's a piece of what we look at to do for our students to help with anxiety, to help with stress, to help with their overall mental health. And I'd like to see that part of the conversation as we go forward. And how does that build in? What's the length? There's quite a ripple effect, to that from a scheduling standpoint, from what other districts are doing it, what other districts are not doing it. So there's a lot of work that has to go into that. So I think as we go through the year, maybe we can find some time or get some information from the administration as to how they see that fitting into again, because our document is fluid. like, how does it fit into the overall strategic work? And I think it fits, and it feels like it fits within our continued focus on what our students need. Mrs. Ackman.
So to be clear, what I'm trying to do is I won't be here when in the seat when the board measures these goals. Over COVID, we have kept the goals really, really broad. And some of that is very healthy. And some of that, I'm just suggesting, make sure then, if you're going to keep them this broad, that when you get to the end of the year, you're really creating measurables that have meaning. And that's my caution. So I have lots of things I'd stick in here. I'm not entirely sure, given my tenure, it would be appropriate to stick them in, although I'm trying to lead the board to understand that when you keep your goals this broad, you then really have to apply meaning to the measure. It can't just be, well, it came at 9 o'clock at night and I was tired. You have to understand what getting an update is. And did you get value out of that update, and were you able to act upon those updates? So if you don't do it on the front end, you just have to really make sure you hold yourself accountable to do it on the back end, is what I'm doing, without interjecting the things that I would put in there, because I do think it's fair for this board, when they're chewing it up at the end of the year, to be able to do so.
Mrs. McCammon.
I think one of the issues we're having is we've mixed metaphors a little bit. This was meant to be, when it started, Board of Education goals. And it's a little bit of a mixture, and this is what we were struggling with last week. It's a little bit of a mixture of administration work and board work. I think if we look at, for example, the communications goal, there are areas where creating a communications committee is ours, and figuring out the scope of that. Communicating is a mutual responsibility. So we don't divorce one from another, but we would be looking at the end of the year to say, what did we as a board do to enhance our communications? How do we hold ourselves accountable? I think if we look at the goal of mental health, that might be a goal where we say, what did we as a board queue up? How did we participate in the community conversation? And then I actually would like to see us move it into the strat plan, to your point, where it is much more specific, has a longer duration, has measurables associated with it, in the way that we've done a lot of our other goals, including some of the educational things. Because I do agree that we need to have a focused and measurable approach, to the extent that we have a lot of work to do there, and it is a multi-year process. So I think that's a little bit what's happened. And so maybe what we can do is sort of, again, maybe we can add under goal 2, the mental health, moving that into the strat plan and creating the appropriate measurables as we get more information in the next couple of weeks or months about what we actually want to hold people accountable to. I do think that holding ourselves and the administration accountable to doing good work is important. I agree.
Thank you. Good. I would suggest anything else that anyone wants to add, shoot an email to myself, and we'll make sure Dr. Adley gets anything else that we want to add in there. So good discussion. Thank you. We will move on to discussion and possible action on proposed music department field trip. Ms. Thompson.
I actually think Ms. Thompson is online. If not, I'll do it.
She is.
I am here. Oh, there I am.
Hey, Colleen, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks. I hope you're having a great summer. Thanks for having me.
Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity to present these proposals over the summer so we can hopefully hit the ground running with planning. So I'll just give a brief overview of the trips. I know you have the proposals in front of you. So we have 2 potential performance tours for the music ensembles this year, one by Jane Minnis and the orchestra, and the other by Chris Andrade and the chorus. The ensembles typically travel every other year, and John Grauer and the band toured in New Orleans last year. So this year it's the chorus and the orchestra's turn. Just a few words about just the benefits of these types of trips. A performance tour builds positive bonds between ensemble members, and it helps them work better as a team when they return to the classroom. Many of our students participate in their ensembles for all 4 years. So the rapport they develop with each other on these trips can last throughout their time in high school. And many students report that traveling with their ensembles is one of the most memorable experiences from high school overall. Jane Minnis has proposed taking the orchestra on a performance tour to Washington, D.C. from Friday, March 24th through Sunday, March 26th, missing one day of school. All students in the orchestra program would be eligible to attend. The tour would be provided by Performing Arts Consultants. It's a travel agency that specializes in music student travel. Just a few highlights of the tour. It would include a clinic at the University of Delaware with an award-winning conductor, a guided tour of the monuments, a festival performance at a local high school, and a performance at Union Station, and an awards ceremony complete with dinner and dancing at the National Conference Center and a tour of the National Museum of Art. So they'll be packing a lot in those 3 days. Students would have the opportunity of staying in a quad occupancy room or a double occupancy room. So the total cost of the trip per student would be either $579 or $609 respectively. And the orchestra will fundraise for the trip and financial aid would be provided for students in need. Do you want me to continue on with the chorus trip or should we discuss this one first?
I think you give us a high-level overview of the second trip.
Sure. So the second trip proposed is the chorus going on a performance tour to Orlando from Thursday, April 20th through Sunday, April 23rd, missing 2 days of school. All students in the chorus would be eligible to attend, and the tour would be provided by Academic and Performance Travel, which is another agency that specializes in music student travel. The highlights include a workshop provided by Disney Sings, where students learn and record a song and record voiceovers in a Disney recording studio, get vocal coaching and audition tips. They would participate in an adjudicated choral festival, perform in several locations throughout the parks, and of course, enjoy the attractions at Universal Studios, Epcot, and the Magic Kingdom. And for quad occupancy rooms, the total cost of the trip per student would be between $14.15 and $16.60 per student, depending on airfare. And again, the chorus would fundraise for the trip and financial assistance would be provided for students in need.
Thank you. Sound like great trips for great groups that we have. So any board questions or comments, thoughts? Mrs. Best.
Thank you. They sound amazing. Ms. Thompson, are there any fees associated for participating in any of these incredible experiences for our students beyond the recreational and social, kind of the competitions or the festivals, et cetera?
Did you say fees?
Right, correct. Entry fees or anything like that?
Nothing above and beyond what was described in the proposal. So the trips are all inclusive. I think the only additional cost for students would be, I think, just a few meals in Disney. But both trips are inclusive of all entrance fees and everything else.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board questions or comments? Good. Thank you very much for staying with us this evening and presenting these. And thanks for all the work behind the scenes on this. May I have a motion to approve the proposed Darien High School Music Department field trips for the 2022-2023 school year? Mrs. Worm, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you for the hard work for organizing that and keep us posted.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
The
Mrs.
teachers and the
Thank you.
students will be excited. Thank you.
Good. So we will move on to update on enrollment for the 2022-2023 school year and possible action on setting elementary class sections. So Mr. Rudolph, thank you. This is our first view into how enrollment is shaking out, and our first opportunity to kind of look at this and discuss. So I will turn it over to you.
So we did provide the Board of Ed an updated document right before the meeting because we did run enrollment figures today and there were some meaningful changes. The update does increase enrollment by 10 students district-wide, 3 at Hindley, 5 at Holmes, 1 at Tokenique, and 1 at Darien High School. As a result, this does add 1 section at Holmes in kindergarten to make it 4, and a total of 107 class sections instead of 106. So one of the things we did flag is obviously our enrollment is down 68 students or 69 students from last year. We did have a number of students withdraw this year, and about 94 students who
Rich, do you
were.
have, is your microphone on? Maybe it's the outside noise. Thank you.
So we did have 94 students withdraw from the district who were enrolled last year going into next year. It includes 7 at Hinley, 9 at Holmes, 5 at Oxford, 14 at Royal, 5 at Tokenique, 26 at the middle school, and then 28 at the high school. And they are spread out over the course of our grades. At the elementary ratio level, typically we see a 5-year average of a persistent ratio of 99.5%, which means you retain 99.5% of your students in a normal year. This year, it's just under 98.5%. So we actually saw a 1% delta greater than what we typically see. We did provide some information when provided as to those students who did withdraw. 29 students left to go to private school. 22 students went to go to a parochial or religious school. 37 students left Darien, either to go to another town in Connecticut or out of state somewhere. And then 6 provided no responses. So just going through the actual sections, again, we are asking for 107 total sections. Kindergarten would be 19 sections, which is the change, which is an average class size of 17.8 across all 5 elementary schools. And that is in line with what we budgeted. First grade, we are recommending 19 sections for an average class size of 18.5. There is 1 additional section compared to budget, and that is at Tokenique. Tokenique and Oxford are the 2 schools that we actually saw an increase in enrollment compared to last year.
You said 19, you mean 18 on budget?
18 plus 1. So we budgeted 18, but we're recommending adding 1 for a total of 19. Second grade is, we budgeted 18. It's actually down 2 sections, 1 at Hinley and 1 at Royal. The average enrollment would be 21.06. In third grade, no change from budget, still at 19, and the average class size would be just under 20 at 19.9. Fourth grade is down 1 section compared to budget, and that is at Holmes, and the average class size would be 20.2. And then in 5th grade, the average class size is 19.8 with 1 section under budget, and that is Royal. Royal, of all the classes that are close, is the closest to tipping. It's 2 students away from tipping at that 5th grade. So of all the 6 grades, really, kindergarten through 5th, Royal 5th grade is the closest to those class size guidelines. The middle school, again, is down 21 students at 1,054, and the high school at 16 students at 1,428 in total. So right now, we're looking at a enrollment of 4,569 students.
No, so typically, we certainly have received a couple on the board, certainly have seen those, a couple of concerns from parents, and we did hear one this evening. So enrollment is typically done just historically. We've done enrollment by medium, and also we've done class sizes by the high projections. That's typically, historically, certainly during my time, and I think of it before that, that's the way the enrollment for budget and so on that has taken place. So that reflects that. Today, actually, Richard just ran this again yesterday, last night. And the Holmes kindergarten tipped, so that was an extra section in there. So the sections that have been addressed of concern are the ones at Holmes and then potentially the one at Royal. Given our guidelines, now the policy is, the policy does, you can interpret the policy to have some interpretation around the composition, the needs, external factors. So it does give the administration the opportunity and the board the opportunity to go outside the guidelines. But these are the sections as they currently stand. Typically at this point, we consider setting the class sizes or otherwise. But this is where we see these are the sections that we're suggesting. Royal potentially, the federal still has to be determined that where Royal would be that those apartments. So we may have some follow-up there. If these numbers change, I would certainly come back. I would say when you talk about class size, right? First of all, the youngest students do have the smallest class size. I would say my general position on class size, when does class size make a difference? If I were to do just sort of like a meta-analysis of all the studies, I would say to you, whenever it reduces it by 5 or 6 kids or so, then it's pretty significant, right? But when you're adding 1 or 2 students here and there, it's not quite as, in my interpretation of it all, not quite as impactful. But that being said, there could be extenuating circumstances, and that doesn't, at this point, I have recommended these particular sections. But yet I'm recognizing I'm saying under these two certain sections, if you reduce them, you would actually make about a 5 or 6 swing, right? But potentially, if these change, you would be making that for other ones as they come along, and potentially might. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Rich, have you gotten any info or know any timelines on federal? I know they're out there advertising to sign up for a lease.
So we did reach out to Jeremy Ginsburg. So they're looking at September for like a start really for people moving in. They don't have any actual leases with children attached to them yet. So as of right now, he's not actually expecting it to have much impact on the school system. In terms of Royal, I will say if it did go from 2 to 3, the conundrum is you'd actually be lower than your low. You'd go to about 15.6 as an average, and the low is 20. The high again is 24, which you're like brushing up right against. So depending on what you do, you're either below your low or you're right at your high.
Mrs. Parent.
So I have a bunch of questions about this. So let's talk about that Royal 5th grade. So my concern with if these classrooms were the new Oxford size, the new Oxford classrooms, great, 2 classrooms is fine. But the Royal upstairs, those rooms are tiny. To have 23 and 24 5th graders that are big and they're smelly in small rooms, it really concerns me. I mean, those rooms are small. And I hear the point that it's a very small class, and there's pros and cons of having classes of 15 and 16 too. So is there a way to think creatively and move those classrooms around so those 2 5th grade classrooms are in larger rooms?
The answer to that would be yes. We have done that throughout well, certainly in the first years, 1.5 years of COVID, that's what we did. We had to do.
And I think if I were the teacher in that room, it would be a lot to have those long limbs stepping all over each other.
I 100% agree with you. That was my issue with it. Royal, those classrooms are tiny, really tiny.
And moving to Holmes, if I can, that 4th grade section, I don't like putting that into 3. That doesn't seem right to me. That cohort of children is the cohort that was in 1st grade when we shut down. And as a former 1st grade teacher, the difference between a September 1st grader and a June 1st grader is huge. That is potentially one of the more formative elementary years. And to have this group they missed 3 months of that. They missed how to tell time. They missed how to, the months of the year. The reading that happens the spring of a 1st grade year is incredible. So my concern is this is not the cohort to have a large class size. I would strongly advocate that we move that back to add another section. Strongly advocate for that. I don't think this is the class this is the cohort of kids to have large classes.
Anything, Mrs. Warren?
I'm in full agreement. I came in with the same thoughts.
Thank you. Mrs. McCammon.
Thank you for the pie chart that breaks down sort of what's happening with our students. It was really helpful to see. So if we look at the number who left Darien or didn't answer, let's say it's ballpark 45. Let's say, we replace some portion of those. My question is sort of from a staffing perspective, how much flexibility do we have? I'm wondering if this year is going to be really wiggly, and I know it's already a little wiggly from a hiring perspective. It could also be wiggling from an enrollment perspective. Can we respond on a dime in a year like this? What's happening, in terms of what ability do we have to plan flexibly?
We'll do it, right? It might not be easy, but if you tell us, we'll do it. The elementary principals have already been screening extra candidates just in case there are other resignations or break sections. So we'll be ready.
So if we got an increase in enrollment in the next 2 weeks that after this meeting that necessitated, let's say we got 2 more kids at Royal tomorrow. But after this meeting, we have the ability to respond.
So for elementary, it's, if you're looking for additional elementary teachers, they tend to be, whether the most plentiful of the pool, if there is. You may have to do a wee transition period if it's someone who's experienced and we think that person, we need that person. They may have to do a transition because it's late in the summer. So you may have a long-term sub or something in the class to start with and until the person is released.
So I guess that's a good point in talking about transition. So if we needed to hire these folks that they're interviewing, Marge, traditionally, what should they be giving their district? 30 days, 40 days?
So they need to give their districts 30 days. And
30
so
days.
districts will hold them until they find a replacement. At the elementary level, most buildings have certified building subs. That's the reason we require them to be certified, so that person could step in. I mean, it's not a perfect transition for the kids, but they would have a sub, as Dr. Adley said, until the other district releases.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Best.
Thank you. So are we staffed as budgeted or are we staffed to this, which changed by 10 students in under a week, right? So obviously there's still some volatility in these numbers. Rich, a question on second grade. I think there might be a mistake for Royal second grade. We have 66 students and we're recommending losing a section. It says 16.5 average class size. That's actually 22. If we go down to 3.
You might be right. Yep.
Did you have a new packet when you sat down?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It says 16.5.
Divided by 4.
But we're losing a section, so it goes down to
correct.
3.
No, that's the
Yeah.
variance against the
You're
budget.
correct.
We're not actually.
Oh, no, she's right.
No,
No, she's
that's
right.
saying
You're
we're
right.
going
You're
down
right.
to
You're
3
right.
sections. So it's
Yeah.
22
You're
students,
right.
not
You're right.
16.5.
You're right.
So that's all 3 sections that are above. Where are we? Second grade. So that's at the high level already. So I would personally consider that a break already. But yeah, again, it's just the numbers changing at the rate that they're changing. This is a great tracking step, but I don't feel like we're ready to eliminate sections right now based on this information.
Mrs. Ivan.
So we did receive a lot of emails about this, about whether we're cutting or adding sections. So just for the public, we're doing neither, right? We budget what we think, and then we set sections tonight based on what we're experiencing. And there is wiggle room, which is why we have optimal. We can go up to, our higher amount should we need to. The question I'm most interested in, and everyone might have an opinion, is has anyone talked to the building principals to understand the particular cohorts and the cohort's needs and how are they feeling about these sections? Because, I know Royal is small. I think second grade teachers are going to argue that second grade is formative, right? So have we heard from the building principals? Sometimes there are cohorts that need a break. Sometimes we experienced it with Oxford a few years ago. I think the worst plan we could do is say, oh, well, if we need it, we'll hire it. We would be releasing budget control very late in the section. Usually what we do in that case until we can hire is we'd hire an aide, right? We don't just come up with a teacher willy-nilly,
Right.
Especially in this environment. So do we have a recommendation around any of these closed sections? And how would you like us to look at it at the moment?
So particularly the homes principal has been vocal about the class size, right? And everything that goes around that. We have had discussions about that at cabinet with cabinet members, and the principal has had different discussions also, and this remains sometimes the principal's position is different than our position. That's just being honest, right? But that doesn't mean to say it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's a fact, right? So we bring this back with that in mind and with those discussions. I will say that I personally have not spoken to the Royal principal on this.
So.
Mr. Senior, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to be clear, none of these are breaking the recommended range, correct? That are in policy?
Correct.
Okay, so a couple are nudging up against the top.
Holmes is over.
I'm sorry?
There's one section of the homes that'll be in the high, not knocking it.
All right, but
No, no, let's-
we've always budgeted to high, just for the record, right? We've always budgeted to high, always planned to high.
Well, let's use it. It's within the recommended range? When you say high?
It's within policy, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're
Okay.
using different words. So that, the policy has two ranges, optimal range and recommended range. There's no high, there's no low. So if we do add a section, we fall out of the recommended range. If I'm doing my math right in some of these, correct? Below the recommended range.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So as a board, if we're willing to do that, that should be the decision. But I guess what I'm pretty amazed at, one, these actual numbers versus projections. I mean, it's like 21 incremental elementary school students left this district relative to the average in the past, which now leaves me asking as a board member, why? And you break out going outside, but that's a different discussion for a different night. But let's get back to, the policy and whether or not we want to get out of the recommended range for any reason. And the policy allows that flexibility, but I'd want to hear some really specific reasons why we want to get out of, break the recommended range, and which is part of our policy. So, and second, the last quick point is, given the volatility, I mean, we got this memo on Thursday, Friday. When did you create the first memo?
So the first one was sent out Friday. And then
When did you crunch the numbers up?
That Friday morning. And then this was done this morning.
So literally a weekend, and we have a shift of 10. And so my question is there any way we can push this out a week and even have a quick special meeting or something if you need be, because of the volatility of the numbers, before we make a final decision? I don't know if that's possible.
Or we could grant the superintendent authority without a meeting, should there
That's-
become a need.
It's kind of what we did last year, if I remember.
Yes.
I mean, this is great information, Rich. The only thing I would ask, I think we've gone down this path before when you do these great graphs, is can you just put in what our guidelines are? So it just rounds out the conversation that we have the data right there next to it. I don't, everyone's points are valid and all stuff we have to take into consideration. My sense is this continues to be incredibly fluid. There are, you speak to some of the real estate folks around here, there are any number of closings going on in August that I know some of them involve bunches of kids. So I don't know, my thought is if we need a special meeting, I think we can figure that out. We have figured it out. If we monitor it closely over the next week, or we have the discussion about granting the superintendent the authority, but the authority with coming back to us and giving a heads up as to the direction this is going in. So Mrs. Achman.
So I would just say two things. I think the concern that I'm hearing is that it's not that we are at or above the optimal range. It's that we're so close that another student will tip it, and then we won't have hired the teacher once the tip occurs. And so, whereas I would always argue to stay in policy, I guess what I'm asking is for that section that is so close, we want to grant the superintendent the authority to keep the additional section should another student appear in the next week or two. I think that's the way to go. Clearly, we have room in our elementary schools, right? We've lost a lot of children. There's space, there's opportunities, there's open classrooms, but maybe what we want to say to the superintendent is, you make the managerial decision, should a section tip or look like it's going to tip? Because often we have parents say they're coming, they haven't put in their forms yet. And so we don't get them. I don't know, Rich, maybe you added those kids in, but usually we have people saying, oh, I'm coming, but they haven't actualized yet. So my suggestion would maybe be we tell the superintendent he has the authority within the next week or two, should the section look like it's going to tip, to include that budgeted section.
Mr. Brown.
I would agree with Ms. Achman that the idea of giving authority makes sense. We've done it before. I also agree with Mr. Sini that the data is in flux. The more chance we have to look at it and have a special meeting is great. I might propose we put those two steps together. And the question would be what, and I guess this is maybe you, Marge, or Dr. Adley, if we were to follow that process of having a special meeting and then giving deference or room, is that next week? Is that 2 weeks? When do you think that cutoff is for a special meeting?
What do you think, Rich, or how you see these enrollments coming in? You know,
They tend to slow down after July 30th, after the end of July.
Yeah.
With the case of both Holmes fourth grade and Royal fifth grade, should it not change, you're below the low. But you're also inching up to that high. So you're kind of out of policy regardless of which choice you make. Typically it kind of slows down at the end of July, beginning of August. The ones who tend to be the late stragglers are kindergarten. None of the kindergarten sections now that Holmes has broke are really in any danger of tipping.
So to answer your question, Mr. Bryan, I don't know if the board would grant permission for me to consider that fourth grade section and the fifth grade section at Royal. If we didn't do that, to come back in probably 2 weeks, I guess, I'm thinking, but.
so I mean, that's the recommendation I would go down, is to give the superintendent the authority. Rich, if there's any significant update, you could give us an update, let's say each Friday or late Thursday or Friday after you crunch the numbers, and then we can decide by the end of next week if we want a special meeting the following week. Yes, Mrs. Akin.
Do we really need a meeting, or could we just grant the superintendent the authority if it tips?
That's fine.
Because if it tips, it breaks.
I guess my only concern, like, I'm fine to grant the 2. I have no problem with that, but I'm just worried if we can wait 2 weeks, make sure there's not a third or a fourth somewhere.
But I
I
think
just
granting
don't-
them authority, we're going to get the data, and he's going to show us the data. We can decide if we want a special meeting to continue the conversation.
I still
I
would
would
say
just-
2 would, if it turns out to be 3,
Well, so
I'd
I-
rather buy a week if I can, and then
I
figure out
think-
whether we need to give 2 or 3.
I think what you're granting is, usually we set sections tonight. And once sections are set, we either have to have a special meeting and release budget control for a specific purpose, or well, really, that's all we can do. So I think the permission the board would be considering is, should a district break after tonight, and we could pick within a certain time frame, we will allow the superintendent to access the budgeted sections without accessing budget control. I'm not entirely sure how to word that and works the finance department, but we have the budgeted sections.
Yeah.
Right.
And really what we're saying is we want to stay in policy, but should we go above policy, we're not all having to come together to say, oh, look, now there's 25 kids in the class. Do you want to raise your hand and vote? But you can't grant that permission indefinitely. So you have to put some,
Yeah, and so I've never seen the numbers swing like this. And so I'm trying to
they do a
say,
lot.
do we have to do it tonight, or can we, kick the can for a week?
Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things I'm confused about. One is, so we're talking 2 sections, but we're down 3, correct? But I've also heard some other members saying that some of the classes that are not in optimal range, they would like to break as well. So I think we have to be clear on what authority we're giving the superintendent on. Is it within the policy, the recommended range, or is it the optimal range? Because I'm in favor of staying within the policy and the recommended range. And because, and a question I have as well with that is that if we go look at Royal, and that is 47 students now, and if we break it down to 3, then you're talking, and I hate using decimals on students, so it's 15, 15, 16 students, not 15.67. What is the low range is 18. So how small is too small of a class? And do we not get diversity? Do we not get it, and what do we lose by going too small of a class?
So that was part of my point. And so the Royal fourth grade is below policy. And it has to be, because that would be above, and that's the better choice. So there are some of these that are already out of policy.
policy is everything. Make
No,
sure when
I
you're
hear
talking
you.
about
I
policy,
hear
you
you.
understand that policy is both optimal and outer ranges.
Understood.
The superintendent is granted the ability to work within that. The Board of Education can also discuss it. You're not, if you're in we are below because we broke sections. That's fine. But if you're in optimal, you can be in optimal or you can be at maximum. That's a board and superintendent decision.
So Mrs. McCammon.
Given the volatility we're experiencing and the fact that we are 3 sections below budget, I suggest we authorize the superintendent the ability to fill up to 3 sections. And then if something appears to be greater than that in 2 weeks, we can meet to release budget control. That would be my suggestion.
Motion?
Good.
Is that a motion?
Want to make a motion?
Yes, that's the motion.
Okay, say that again. Try again. Say it again.
I move that we grant the superintendent the authority to use up to 3 additional sections based on enrollment trends. I leave that's the motion, and then I would suggest that as a matter of practice, if the enrollment trends continue to be wild and we need to meet for budget control, let's plan that for about 2 weeks' time.
Second the motion. Mr. Sini, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay. And
Sorry,
then,
March.
and then Rich, you'll provide us kind of a weekly update. All right.
Or if you get 10 in one day out of the blue too.
Yeah, I mean, a daily update's fine. It's something really. All right, good. Thank you. Moving on to first reading and discussion of proposed revisions to board policy series 5,000 students, 5240 hazing, 5260 use of reasonable physical force, 5350 immunizations, 5710 non-discrimination of students, and proposed new board policy 1320 civility and respectful conduct. Mrs. Ackman and Ms. Sion.
The board met, it was a first reading. I think everyone has it. We're happy to entertain questions, but I don't think there was anything shocking in any of these particular policies. They are revisions, keeping us up to date with law. Thank you for everyone for continuing to meet during the summer. If anyone has questions tonight, we're happy to entertain them or before our final read.
Questions, comments on these? All right, that is a first reading, so they will come back to us. Thank you, Mrs. Ackman and Ms. Sion. Moving on to further discussion and possible action on proposed schedule of 2022, 2023 regular Board of Education meetings and subcommittee meetings. Dr. Adley.
So the dates are as we had them at the last meeting. I haven't had any feedback. There are some dates that were changed for curriculum with facilities, just to accommodate in particular Chris's schedule, but they were still on the same sort of days, Thursdays of the week.
Thoughts, comments, questions? Find my motions here. We have a motion to approve the proposed schedule of the 2022-2023 regular Board of Education meetings and the proposed revised schedule of subcommittee meetings. Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Parent, all those in favor? It's unanimous with everyone here. Thank you. We will move on to personnel report. Ms. Sion.
So I think Dr. Adley described our hiring situation. We do have 12 or 13 additional openings. As you can see from the resignations and retirements, we're losing people in a variety of positions, including unfortunately Craig Campbell, our athletic trainer. So it's different steps and different positions.
All right. Thank you, Marge. We'll move on to action items. Motion for the Board of Education to accept upon receipt of the temporary certificate of occupancy for the new Oxford School. So in speaking with Mr. Mooney, we have kind of a revised motion. Move that upon receipt of the temporary certification of occupancy for the newly constructed portion of the Oxford School, the board accepts the school from the town building committee with thanks. So questions or comments there? Mrs. Ockman.
My only question would be, and I'm sure this building committee has, it's fantastic, but if we find that something hasn't met one of our building specs, does that preclude us, even if they have a CO, must we accept the building at that point?
According to my conversation with Tom, no, and that there is an ongoing punch list, and this allows, there'll be a temporary CO, then there'll be there. My understanding is there could be 2 or 3 certificates of occupancy. The initial one is to let the administration in there to get the school set up. And Mr. Mooney said the one that is of the utmost importance is the acceptance of the CO, which will allow the students to go into the school in August. So that'll be forthcoming.
Okay, that's my only concern, like this
Yeah.
building, it became a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, good.
It's fabulous, by the way. It's absolutely beautiful.
So we should think about it. Tour, or leave it open, or figure out when it's open and there's people there, and people can stop in. It's
No
it's
leaving it open.
spectacular. Why not? No, it's spectacular. I was in there again today, and just incredible when you, having been part of it from conceptual design to now walking through it, it's a pretty incredible process. So move that upon receipt of the temporary certification of occupancy for the newly constructed portion of the Oxford School, the board accepts the school from the town building committee with thanks. May I have a second, I guess? Mrs. McCammon, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. And again, thank you to the building committee for the incredible work on that. More to come. Motion to establish a board communications committee. We went through this discussion at the retreat, and it was through the retreat, the sense of the board at the retreat was to form a communications committee. So may I have a motion to establish a board communications committee? Mr. Sini, second by Mrs. Best. All those in favor? That is, all those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Ockman. Yeah, that, Julie. And then we'll further information on that. Some people have reached out to me that want to be part of that. So we'll figure out kind of the leadership on that. And then out of the retreat, there's a couple of things that I think we'll have the communication committee work on right away. So we'll move back to public comment, Michelle.
Good evening. For participants, please state your name and address for the record log. Each participant will have up to 3 minutes to comment. We'll start in person.
Sure. Anyone in public? No. Anyone online?
There are no raised hands at this time. Do you want to give them a minute? 5 seconds.
Are there, I can't see the number. Are there people online, Michelle?
There are, but
Okay.
there are no raised hands at this
Okay.
time.
Thank you all. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Bass, second by Mr. Sini. Thank you all.